Lesson 2, we're at globalization and human rights. Sorry, I didn't realize how pixelated that photo or that image was. But we were taking a look at human rights today. What are human rights? Who should have them? What should they be? All that good stuff. So here are some questions we will explore in this lesson. What are human rights? How are human rights protected in Canada? How are human rights promoted in a globalizing world? In what ways do some countries violate the human rights of their citizens? Okay, so first let's talk about what human rights are. Well, they are things we are allowed to be, things we are allowed to do, and things we are allowed to have, and that we should be able to be those things, do those things, and have those things. Um, and they protect us, right? Without these human rights, we would live in societies that are filled with violence, abuse, ignorance, and hatred. All right. And so human rights try to promote a world where we have less violence, less abuse, less ignorance, less hatred. Okay. And human rights help us get along in a world of many languages, religions, and cultures. Human rights sort of set this framework for what everybody deserves to have and to be able to do, regardless of their language, religion, and culture. So, how are human rights promoted in a globalizing world? So in 1948, the United Nations passed what's called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So this is a document where they made a big list of all of the things that people should be allowed to do or be or have, regardless of where they live. Right? So this document was not made by leaders of countries all around the world. It was made by a rather small number of people, relatively small number of people. But this relatively small number of people declare that no matter where somebody lives, no matter who they are, they should be given certain rights and certain freedoms. So what I'm going to get you to do is go find out what some of those rights and freedoms are. It's a pretty big document. If you go into Google, here I'll show you guys how to do it. If you go into Google and you type in, here, let's start a new tab. If you type in UN Human Rights, the first one that pops up at the top here, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you open that up, scroll down a little bit, skip the preamble, that's boring, and then we have the articles. All right, so each article is sort of like a statement explaining some type of right or freedom that every person deserves, right? So look at Article 5. No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Okay, so no one should have that. No one shall be held in slavery, all right? What else have we got? Everyone has the right to be recognized as a person before the law, right? We can't have certain humans being considered second-class citizens. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, right? The police should not be allowed to just arrest you for no reason, right? So these are rights that the United Nations has declared everybody should have, regardless of where they live, right? Freedom of movement. You should be allowed to move out of your country and then move back into your country, right? Obviously, this was pre-COVID. Okay, so there's a long list of them, right? How many are there? Let me take a look here. There are 30. You only need 9. Okay, so scroll through and pick 9 that you find interesting, right? So like right to life, freedom of expression. Just keep it simple. You don't need to write full sentences. Just write down sort of like a paraphrase. All right, so you can pause this video and go do that now. Welcome back. All right, so you learned about the rights that are included in the UN Declaration. So this declaration sent a message to all the nations of the world. The message was human rights are global. They apply to everyone. They apply to people everywhere, all the time. It doesn't matter where somebody lives. They deserve human rights. So right away, 48 countries signed this declaration and stated that they agreed with it. But now it's actually signed by all 192 member states or member countries of the United Nations, right? So any country that's a member of the United Nations has signed on to this declaration. Okay, but there's some problems with this declaration. The declaration is not law, right? So it's difficult for the UN to enforce these rights in all countries, right? So I can think of many countries off the top of my head who have signed this declaration because they wanted to join the United Nations. They have to sign the Declaration of Human Rights. But do they actually give their citizens all of the rights that are in the list? No, definitely not. All right. If a country signs this declaration, they are saying they want to do something in the future to promote human rights in their country. They are agreeing not with a set of laws, they're agreeing with a set of principles. They are saying that they agree with these rights. It doesn't mean that they are necessarily going to actually guarantee these rights for their citizens. Okay? But many people who support the document have said it's actually been very helpful because the declaration can be used to put pressure on countries who violate human rights, right? And it has held up a certain standard for the world to try to achieve, right? So this declaration has also inspired countries to adopt constitutions guaranteeing human rights right from this list. Okay, so most countries of the world now have constitutions that state, all humans deserve to have this right and this freedom, this right and this freedom. And a lot of those rights and freedoms are the exact same as the ones that are contained in the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Right, so some good things have come out of it. So in Canada, those rights and freedoms are included in our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So this is actually in our Constitution now, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And so if the government tries to pass a law that goes against people's rights and freedoms, well, then the judicial branch of our government can strike down that law, saying that, this law here goes against human rights, right? So this law is not going to take effect, right? Or if somebody who works for a corporation believes that their boss has violated their human rights, well, then they can sue their boss and bring their boss before the courts and say, I believe my boss has violated this right or this freedom that is in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And then if you're right, well, then that the boss is going to get in trouble, right? So maybe some good has come out of the UN Declaration, right? It's up to you to decide. All right, there is a video for you to check out called "What Are the Universal Human Rights?" They are in this playlist, so you can just scroll to the next video here, and you can choose to watch that other video. So pause this video now and go watch that video. Okay, I hope it was good. I hope you learned a couple things, and we're back. In what ways do some countries violate the human rights of their citizens? We're going to do a little case study, and we're going to take a look at this country right here that is highlighted in red. That is the country of China. So we're going to take a look at some of the human rights violations that have occurred in the past, and then we're going to take a look at some of the human rights violations that occur today in China. Okay, so we're going to do a little video study, and we're going to be watching a video, obviously, that is called Tank Man. Maybe you've seen this image before. It's a pretty famous, pretty iconic photo. And this is a photo that was taken all the way back in 1989. All right, none of you guys were alive yet. But in 1989, this guy, who we now call Tank Man, stood in front of a huge column of tanks and protested against their government for their massacre at the Tiananmen Square that had occurred the day before. All right, so the Tiananmen Square protest. The Tiananmen Square is this public square in the capital city of China, Beijing. And in 1989, there were Chinese students who were later supported by unions. They were supported by people from across China supported these protesters and came out and protested with them. And they wanted rights and freedoms. They saw some of the rights and freedoms that people were being given in Western liberal democracies, and they wanted to have some of those same rights and freedoms. Okay. However, the Chinese government responded violently. They sent in their military. Thousands of protesters were likely killed, although the Chinese government still does not acknowledge that this event happened in the first place. So you guys have this chart in your notes. On the left side of the chart, there's a list of human rights and freedoms. And then in the right side of the chart, you need to write down how each of these rights and freedoms has been violated by the Chinese government, either back in 1989 or more recently, okay, by watching the examples from the video. Okay, so this chart is in your notes. The video is in this playlist. It's called Tank Man. It's an SBS documentary. And you can go ahead and watch it now, fill out that chart, and become educated. Have a good day.